right, everybody, welcome back to RoomPack's ResEdChat podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell, and if you are new to the show, this is a podcast series focusing on a variety of topics of interest of higher ed professionals who work in and with college and university housing, residential education, all the names under the sun. And this episode in particular today is really interesting to me personally because I'm a parent. I have a 3-year-old daughter. And I've never really talked about it at length within the context of working in higher education. And certainly residence life brings its own unique challenges and opportunities of working as a parent and everything. So I imagine maybe this could be the first of many episodes. It's a very complex and nuanced topic. So we'll cover as much as we can here today. Maybe kind of just starting from sort of the more kind of general lens. But Jess, you are joining us here to talk all about this. But before we get to anything else, if you can introduce yourself briefly and kind of give a quick elevator pitch style version of your professional background, and then we'll get on to our topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dustin. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Robinson. I use she, her pronouns. I currently serve as the Associate Director at San Francisco State University within residential life. But I've been working in residential life since the mid to early 2000s. Started my career back in the Midwest, been in Michigan, Indiana, been out here now in California. I'm just starting my 7th year. But more importantly to this, I am the proud parent to a 4-year-old little girl. I'm also a single parent, and I work in residential life. And because I live in California and in San Francisco, I actually live on campus as well. So I do, not only am I an administrator within residential life, I also live on campus with a child. So I'm excited to share my experiences and connect with y'all.
Yeah, I guess it's good just to kind of have a couple of those footnotes around sort of like your own experience, because as much as parenting is, just a challenge and, title and sort of responsibility that's shared by so many, there's always kind of the nuances of sort of, the context that any of us parent in. So I'm sure that'll sort of interweave into our conversation today of, living on campus, being a single parent, and certainly something that we share of, parenting through the pandemic over, the past few years. So, and I guess because I know, you've been at San Francisco State University for the past several years. So, my kind of connecting the dots, at least, like you had your child while you were there, like, so that at least has been sort of one constant through, prior to her being born and since she's been born. So, I guess we'll kind of start there. I guess we'll start big, kind of just the general experience of being a parent at Res Life. So that's been all, there at San Francisco State University. And like, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, to be honest, it's been, for the most part, very positive. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a single mom. I did that by choice, which means I used an anonymous donor. So it's just her and I. And from the minute I started thinking about this, I've been extremely supported by my department, my division, the institution. I think one of the things that's really important to mention is I probably wouldn't have been able to take this journey if I was still working in higher education in other places in the country. California is a very open, accepting state. Our health insurance and our health care allowed me to take this journey, which I don't know if I would have been able to do that had I lived in, Indiana or even Michigan, which are the other places that I've worked.
Yeah, because I guess that's like a very important point. We can kind of sit with that for a minute. So, I guess I don't like how long this was sort of on your mind. Like, was that actually like just literally part of the decision making process of just like, you're kind of putting it off? And I guess not even like you moved there purely to do that, but after you moved, you realized that like, wow, this could actually be more possible.
Yeah, I think, to be very honest, I've always wanted to be a mom, like my entire life. I'm the oldest daughter. I'm like the oldest kid, oldest cousin. I mean, anybody that has worked for me will tell you that I have like that mama bear energy. So that has always been something in my to-do list. And I'll be honest, I didn't think it was possible before I moved here. So it wasn't part of my active choice to moving to the state, but it was moving here and the experiences that I had here that made me realize, oh, I can actually be a single parent. Prior to that, I'll be honest, the intensity of residential life, the expectations of residential life, I did not think that I could be a parent on my own because of what was required of me as a woman working in higher education, being in leadership positions in higher education, the standards and the expectations. To be honest, wouldn't have probably done this if I had not taken this job out here and experienced what I had out here.
Yeah, and I think that's like something that I kind of want to like bold, underline, circle, highlight is like, you know, any sort of institutional leader listening to this, I think it's an important takeaway, sort of the kind of subtext or sort of implication of what you said is that like I mean, like one, just like the area that you lived in. I'm sure it's just like, yeah, I could see you like raising a kid here, but then just like the institutional culture, the perks and benefits and all that. It's like, I think it might be like that weird thing where you don't even realize it. If you are the leader of an organization where people start to like be like, wow, everybody's like having kids and doing all this. It's like, yeah, because you're probably doing the right things. If like, people feel like great, great parental leave. I've got great health insurance. I feel like I'm not so burnt out. I can't even think about like, even trying or planning or anything like that. So like that, how important it is to, build that really good supportive culture just with like the nuts and bolts of just sort of like stuff you can kind of like quantify of like, what kind of leave policy do we have? What kind of, other perks and benefits and insurance things do we provide and all that kind of stuff. So that's really powerful. Yeah. And I mean, that it's like a tragedy that, that is a story shared by so many people of like, they just because I've heard like stories of just even for other goals that people have had in life where they're like, I live in New York City and all this other stuff. Like, I just thought X, Y, or Z goal just like was not possible. It would not happen. And then I went and moved out to, Iowa or something, found a community that I really like, and I'm now able to like open up that coffee shop I always wanted to, or whatever. Like it could be like whatever it is. And just that idea of like changing context and how many people were sort of like putting off or just sort of like thinking that certain goals of theirs weren't possible because of the context that they were working or living in or whatever else. So that's really profound as well. And just great that, yeah, like you found a place where you sort of were able to kind of realize over time like, wow, maybe I don't need to like perpetually put this off, like. And that's really awesome. And I think even just like the next part of it, because I think you know, part of it is the sort of quantifiable policies and those sort of things, but even just sort of like working relationships. And it sounds like you at least felt comfortable sort of bringing it up to people. But I guess just sort of like talking about that sort of interpersonal piece of just sort of like, norming that you were interested, that you were planning, that you were pregnant, I guess, because that's even that idea of like you have to work within those policies and that culture with people. And as good as sort of everybody's aspirations or intentions are, that's obviously probably where maybe some of the bumps come in of just like, you know presumptions that people have, good, bad, or otherwise. So I guess like, because that I know the way I framed the question when we were kind of prepping was like, what do you wish other people knew about like regarding this experience? So I guess just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think what something you said earlier really resonated me is like, oh, I have to adjust the other things that I want to be able to accommodate this dream, right? And I think that for me, or like I had to get out of residential life. I hear a lot of people say, I couldn't be a parent in res life, so I'm going to look through other aspects of higher education work, right? I'll be honest, I'm a res life generalist. I don't have any desire to do anything but residential life. I think it's fantastic that people have other aspirations, but I like what I do. I don't want to do anything besides residential life. And so for me, one of the things that was really helpful in this whole process was, understanding that one, my supervisor was leading kind of a shift and a change of how we look at residential life, and really honing in on not everybody has to be there all the time for crisis or to do all the work. They were like, take your vacation. So, like, for instance, we just actually had the conversation with our team of our hope and unwritten expectation, because we're not going to force you to, but our hope is that you take 10 days off in the fall semester, and at least 5 of those should be in a row, because we want to make sure that you're creating that wellness and that time away. And that attitude is not anything that I had ever experienced before. And so that was something that was really important. I think the other aspect of it was, once I started to, I think, get comfortable with the idea myself that I was going to go down this path, I was the only parent in residential life. Nobody else in my department has any kids. And my boss was very much like, I'm not a parent. I have never supervised a parent. So you just tell me what you need, and I'm going to accept that as the truth. And so we had established that trust, that I knew he was willing to listen when I was like, I need something different. And he knew me well enough to know that I maybe wasn't always going to ask. So a great example is he took me off the duty rotation about 2 months before I gave birth and was like, you're not going to be on duty for at least the 2 months after you come back from maternity leave. And so we just worked it out and made sure that I kind of front loaded some of those responsibilities or backloaded some of those responsibilities. But he was very open to making some adjustments, figuring out how we do things a little bit differently in a way that we hadn't done before. And so his openness was really helpful. I think as well, the rest of the departmental leadership was super helpful around adjusting and making room for the fact that we now had a parent in our group. And so one of the things that was really great for me when having those conversations is I didn't feel like I had to hide what my desires were, what I needed, who I was, how this was going to change how I approached the work that I was doing. I think another thing that was super helpful, obviously I have a private office, and I'll be probably another topic for a podcast. We had one heck of a fall semester when I came back from maternity leave. It was the fall of 2019. We had a student leader protest. We had a lost master key. We then COVID hit in that next semester, and so I brought my daughter to work with me quite often because she was little. I mean, when they're little, when they're like 2 to 4 months, they're pretty easy to just set on a bouncer on my desk and I can work on different things. And so my daughter came to work with me pretty often in those, first few months.
Yeah. I mean, something that's kind of resonating with me is the idea that like you considering and becoming pregnant and, giving birth to your child, like seemed like it introduced maybe like this variable that had to be sort of interfaced with of just sort of like reckoning with like, sort of work life balance or like any of those sort of obligations that are sort of, just standard sort of operating procedures for residence life. And like it's refreshing that they like the fact that they were even making those changes, because I think some places might have been like, oh well, we're talking about this or that, we're considering whatever, and that like, it's like you make the rules, you can choose to change or bend them or whatever. So like, that this is not like natural law, that we're dealing with here about like duty rotations or whatever else. So that's really really great that they were, so receptive to that. And I guess as like a clarifying question too, like, do you feel like it was like on sort of the spectrum of like you kind of had to ask for things and they were just sort of like, again, that idea of like, well, you tell me what you need and we'll try to make it happen, and on the other side that they were like suggesting things that you didn't even necessarily consider? You feel like it was like a good mix that you were both sort of active in the process and sort of being kind of actively supported?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of both. And for me, I have a hard time asking for help. I think, and I feel guilty sometimes asking for help. And so it was really wonderful when people would suggest, "Hey, have you thought about doing this?" or "What about doing this?" I think the other aspect of it that adds to that guilt is I'm one of the only, at that time, I was the only female leadership team member in our department. I'm still the only female director within our department. And so at times that felt like I wasn't maybe pulling as much weight as anybody else. And so my colleagues were super supportive of like, no, Jess, we've got this. You hang out with your daughter, jump in when you can. I think that was really helpful, especially at the start of the pandemic, of me trying to figure out even the small childcare that I had figured out pre-pandemic went away. And I was trying to figure out, how do I balance all of this? My daughter is now, 6 to 10 months old, and she's now mobile, and that's not as easy. It's not as easy to work from home. And we were still on campus, right? All of us live on campus, all of us work on campus, and we still had residents here. And how do we manage the duty situation? And I didn't even have to ask. My colleagues like, we will take care of duty until you can get back to campus with us. And so I moved 2.5 hours away to my parents' house and zoomed in to work every day. And I didn't have to worry about duty for, 3 months because they were really willing to just say, we're going to do this. And I was able to then take on extra things around some of the COVID planning and some of the other aspects and allowed them to manage that. So it was honestly 50-50.
Which I feel like it's like that's kind of what I wanted to hear, like that idea of like that they were engaged in the process and were also receptive to you sort of, probably just being assertive with maybe just like very like niche, like that was not at that time an experience that they had some familiarity with, so they would like need to rely on you to maybe be kind of mindful of particular things. But yeah, I mean, it presents this sort of like challenge and opportunity to sort of like put into work like a lot of things that I think we sort of espouse as sort of conceptual values or whatever else. And uh yeah, I mean, it just really can be that sort of variable to re-examine how what expectations we put on which people, and even just like broadly, like why do we even do that or something, and then it just can maybe have like other sort of kind of ripple effects. But even just the fact that you know it tells me like they valued you enough to do what they needed to do to support you, and that you were in kind more than willing to do what you could do, like you said, like other duties to sort of support the team and everything. So um I think, yeah, like me kind of looking at this question now as sort of the like interpersonal stuff, it's like that idea of like wishing other people knew that they can be much more of an active support, because I assume most people would probably say the thing of just like, you tell me what you need and we'll do whatever, but then like they're almost like too passive. They would just pull back so much, and it's on you entirely to ask every single time, could you maybe do this, could you maybe do that, could and you would hope that people would, because that's even the idea that like they could suggest something and you'd be like, actually no, I don't want that, like and that could be where you kind of are negotiating or something. Because I think that could be the slippery slope that I imagine maybe many people in like higher ed res life may not make, but like that they would be like overly accommodated. They'd put you in sort of a bubble and be like, no, 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 don't do anything. Just like put your feet up and whatever else. It's like, no, I mean, I like doing this work. I like being here. I want to contribute. So like, don't like coddle me. So yeah, that's like, you would not want them to be like overly suggestive about like, how about we all just take care of everything that you have to do, and you just realize it's like, no, 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 come on, so yeah, I think that it's really, really helpful to kind of explore that of how you were interacting with your colleagues. And now I'm just thinking of a good follow-up question. How did you interact with students and student leaders around this? Because I guess just like the idea of, you had to make maybe like pivots every once in a while or different things about expectations. So any anecdotes, I guess, about sort of like, how you were engaging with the students that you're supporting?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that I was very open about my process of like trying to get pregnant. And I even like blogged during my time of trying to get pregnant. And some of our student leaders had found my blog. So before I even made an announcement, like they were like super stealthy because they were like, "Oh, I found Jess on Instagram and she meant put in her blog, and so now I'm going to read it." So most of them already knew that I was pregnant before I even announced that I was pregnant, and so they were, super excited for me, those that I had good relationships with. And, I think I don't do as much in my role. I don't have as much student interaction as some of my other team members. And I think when it came to working with students, to be honest, now a lot of our students are like, I just need a mom hug, right? So it definitely humanized me in my role as the associate director, as a person that manages appeals for terminations and all that fun stuff. I think that it very much has humanized who I am as an individual to these students, because they are like, oh, Jess understands the parenting thing, right? And I'll be very honest, a lot of times, even with my campus colleagues who are not parents and they're talking to a parent, sometimes they're like, maybe we just need to send Jess in as the parent, right? Sometimes that is a labor on me, but also it is helpful because it does humanize me as an administrator, as somebody who's making tough decisions. And I think that's been really helpful. I think for those of you that are more directly working with students in that day to day operations, I think it's just being honest, right? I think our students and our student leaders have high expectations of response and availability, especially for our live in team members. And so it's being clear about your boundaries, like going back to like Brene Brown, clear as kind, right? Like it is about being clear. And I think also managing your own guilt for being clear. That has been, I knew to expect the mom guilt, but I think it has taken a lot more of a toll on me than I ever anticipated, around the guilt of prioritizing my role as a parent over my role as a residential life professional.
Yeah. Yeah, parental guilt, especially mom guilt, I would say, is like because I think that has maybe like the combo multiplier, of like this little person that I created, like, oh, what are we? So yeah, I mean, because that's like that idea of the clear is kind, I think is another just great takeaway. You can apply it in a lot of circumstances because I think people, uh, just like you said, like knowing that you're a parent is going to change the way I think that people, empathize or sympathize, but then just also being clear of like, hey, like I'm running late from drop off or pickup, or my kid got sick, like just being clear about that versus like canceling with no reason or whatever, like rescheduling something, whatever. Like people just know that like it just that in and of itself of being a parent introduces its own variable and sort of like, chaos of, not knowing what might happen one day to the next. So, yeah, just that simple thing and just, yeah, like putting clear boundaries, around like availability and stuff, I think is definitely really important. Um, and I guess, last yeah, and I don't know if you have a follow up because I had one sort of like clarifying thing too, but
I would say I think when I think about parental guilt, I think so many people think parental guilt is I feel guilty for maybe not giving my child as much or I'm taking time away from my child. And I definitely anticipated that. What I didn't anticipate was feeling guilty because I felt like I wasn't doing as much work as I had been before or that I was choosing my child, right? Over the importance of something with work. And that was the thing that I was not anticipating was I sometimes feel guilty when I need to manage a meeting and last minute I get a call from daycare saying or preschool saying she needs to be picked up and then I have to shift and ask somebody else to take care of that meeting for me. And that to me that was something that was super surprising and wasn't something that I had expected.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like there's two sides of that coin for sure. It's like, yeah, when like, yeah, you get taken away from a work thing because again, it's like I like my job, I like like all those details I get where it's just like being taken away from that, or the other side where it's like, yeah, I wish I could spend more time with my kid, and I think that's something all parents going to share. But so yeah, because I wanted to ask too, just like because you'd mentioned some like key, newborn, early kind of anecdotes and stuff. Anything from like as your daughter was getting older of sort of how you kind of negotiated things. So obviously, like there's depending, you can send kids to daycare, at various points in their life, but like I imagine that was something that maybe was sort of this like inflection point where you're like, okay, I think I need to sort of consider this as sort of an option to better be able to balance things. So I just kind of talking through that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely the flexibility to adjust hours, I think is really important. I'm salaried, so I have more flexibility within my schedule, but knowing that if I drop her off at 8, then I work an extra hour because our work hours are 9 to 6 on my campus. I work that extra hour, but I have the flexibility to then pick her up early so I can take her to dance class. And so having that flexibility within the toddler years is toddler and even on is not easy, but is important because they're not as easily agreeable, I guess. Right? They have their own personalities, they have their own attitudes. I think that is definitely something that is really important to be thinking through. I think also the flexibility to work from home when you need to. I'll be honest, I don't like working from home. I don't think I'm as productive when I work from home, but it's nice to have I do have one work from home day, do Zoom meetings and just manage through like cleaning the house or doing laundry. That is super helpful. The flexibility that we've had, post, and I say post pandemic because we're still in it, right? But the flexibility that we've continued to have within our department has been very, very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's even just like the reality that I think people need to accept about like, remote jobs, hybrid, whatever, is that like sometimes being home is that idea of like, I just have a little bit more bandwidth to just like do all the chores and exist as a human and not feel like I'm, perpetually behind or whatever else. Like, there's value in that, especially when it's just like you rethink the idea of a job as like, as long as you are like producing the outcomes that you should be, like, we're good. Like, don't, either like because I think it's like that idea of like if you're just like burning the midnight oil, it's like there's going to be diminishing returns. So it's like please don't do that. I don't want like garbage works that I have to like review and edit, or just that idea of like yeah, like if I'm working from home, it's like I do have the ability to throw some dishes in the dishwasher and do some like, and that's okay, so that I can like take X amount of, minutes from my day to sort of set that up and have it going in the background and kind of, just sort of mosey around in between meetings and stuff. Or like, I need to take a break from this sort of monotonous task. I'll just like, do whatever. So like, yeah, I mean, I'm thankful that more institutions and more teams are at least acknowledging that that is something to kind of introduce and make available to people, I guess, like as they see fit to kind of like fit in, work from home day or something to kind of, have that better balance, especially for parents. Since like on the weekends, it's like, well, I've got the little one running around. It's a lot harder to like do all the things like just on those 2 days, or just on nights or something. It's like, I just want to like eat dinner and hang out and go to bed because I gotta like do this again tomorrow. I gotta work again and everything. Like,
And I think too, it's like when you get home, like normally pre-kid, I was like, okay, I get home, I can like vacuum today or I can do things to keep my house tidy. But at the end of the day, I've been spending an entire day managing other people's emotions and managing other people. And then I still have to manage another tiny human. And so it's like by the time she goes to sleep, I just want to sit and do absolutely nothing. And so knowing that I have the ability to do that, well, then I can focus and prioritize doing some of those house things while I work from home has been super wonderful.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we wind down, I think you've already given some amazing sort of like quotes or, tidbits of advice to, to kind of live by. And we'll have a portion for resources for sure. But just advice, because I think, sometimes for me, it's like, those little like anecdotes or little quotes or whatever is like, it is what kind of rattles around in your head when you're trying to like kind of interface with things. So, yeah, just any advice.
Yeah, I think for me, you had said the word work life balance, and even pre kids, it was one of the things I was like, "Ugh, balance means things are equal." I really think of it as like a work life wellness. So, what do I need to do within my work world and within my home world to keep myself healthy, to keep myself well, to feel like I am a human and a thriving human, right? I think those are the things that I really focus in on. So, it is really about how do I prioritize, how do I set that flexibility for myself. I've never been one to thrive in high structure, but even now as a parent, if you are somebody who thrives in high structure, then figure out that structure for you. If you're somebody who needs to be flexible, figure out ways to increase the ability to be flexible, right? I think that is a really important thing, especially while working within housing, because things happen in unpredictable ways. Whether it be on call responsibilities, whether it be crisis or emergency situations, those are things that you need to either figure out the structure that works for you or the mindset of flexibility that allows you to do that. I think another thing for me is really going back to that clarity and being clear and being direct and being honest. So there are days that I'm just like, I'll be honest with you, I can't handle people right now because my toddler just threw a 30-minute freak out about the fact that her sock is pink and not purple, right? And so, really being honest with my team, with my staff, with my supervisor, I can't people today. So, I'm going to arrange some meetings and move forward, or I know I'm supposed to lead this meeting. I don't have the capacity to deal with it. So, can somebody else do it, right? Asking for what I need. And even if when I ask, I feel like people are judging me for it, I don't care anymore. Like, right, creating that thick skin for myself of not that I don't care because I do care, but creating that thick skin of I am doing this for the betterment of not only myself and my child, but also because then I can show up better as a professional. Right. And I think that's so asking for what you need or what you want, and but also understanding the impact that that has on another person. So if I'm asking you to take over this responsibility, what am I taking from you? What am I helping you with? Right. And that's really important. Just trying to think of other things. I mean, if you're thinking about, oh my gosh, can I be a parent in residential life? I think it's yes, but you have to be mindful of your environment, right? And sometimes you have to make a hard choice. I came from an environment that I would never have been able to do this. Things were not great. And so I made the choice. I know I can't change what's above me. So I have to make the choice to get myself to a place that's different, right? And so I think those are the things too, is anytime you have those decisions to make, sometimes you have to make the choice that seems harder, but actually ends up being easier in the long run.
Right, because like transitions are hard, so it's like that's always going to be there's going to be some sort of the inertia to stay where you are and the resistance to kind of be uh pull towards what you want. But yeah, I mean, I think it's all very sound advice, because I think, yeah, the tough skin to judgment and not caring what people think, like, it is just that idea of like the confidence in exactly what you said is sort of the where that sort of disregard for people's judgments or whatever. It's like, hey, you know what, none of us would be happy if I were to be doing this right now. Like, I'd be, yeah, like a little, crabby or whatever. And it's like, uh, even like exactly you said too. It's like, okay, if you can like just do this like weekly team meeting thing or whatever else, like, I'll do X, Y, or Z, whatever. Like, and that's like just a very, just good way to kind of navigate that. But, yeah, I mean, it's, and I guess because like you kind of the like work life wellness versus balance, and it's like I just had this thought where I'm like, whoever coined the term work life balance, like it is so ingrained, even though it's like not the greatest term. So we've just now been like fighting for years to be like, well, actually, I don't know. I think of like it as a pendulum or whatever else. But yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is kind of where my mind kind of went with that sort of notion, is how you have to kind of like take each day as it comes, sort of calibrate, check in with yourself. How are you feeling? What do you need? And all that, versus being too highly structured. Like, I definitely agree with you on that point, where it's kind of a day to day thing, and sort of going with the flow in that regard of, where it's like, what, I think I need to like just go take a walk, or actually maybe I need this or that or the other thing. You kind of just like are kind of a consistent kind of calibration, to your present state. So, um,
Oh, I have another one. I think, to be very honest, if it's possible and you can get your child into the daycare or preschool that is closest to campus or on campus, that has been a game changer for me. My daughter's preschool is literally across the sidewalk from my office and down some steps. And it's been like being able to have access to childcare on campus is huge. So I think that's one thing, like a piece of advice, but also a challenge for like people who have the ability to make decisions. If you can prioritize, especially those of us that are working maybe not so traditional hours, getting, having that childcare. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's not cheap, but it still is super helpful to be able to have her just right there. So I, walk to work every morning, and we drop off our stuff here, and then I take her to school, which is really nice. So that's another kind of point, tip slash challenge for people above us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's awesome, because like office buildings and cities do that kind of thing to kind of incentivize people, and then like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like just like the very crunchy notion where it's like, what, should we all be so lucky to be able to live in the environment of like on campus with all these cool things to do at a daycare and all that? Like, that's very sort of like, kind of, yeah. So it's that idea of like, yeah, like so many people would think the opposite of like, oh my god, I would never do that, and it's certainly not going to be the best fit for everybody. But like when you think about the details, it's like, yeah, there's definitely like a lot of appeals, and to kind of getting things set up that way. But so yeah, I mean, all great advice, and we will wrap up though. If there's any like resources or books or articles or podcasts or anything else that you'd want to name drop that we could include in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, I when I was going through this, I utilized a lot Google searches, but for higher ed specifically, there's the Student Affairs Moms group, which is fantastic. And granted, it's geared towards people who identify as mom or who, feel that way in terms of their identity. That has been really helpful. I've utilized the Student Affairs Moms group on Facebook pretty regularly. Finding other parents within housing, residential life, or within student affairs has been really helpful to me. I don't have a lot around books. I'll be honest. My sister's an early childhood specialist. I talk to her a lot about things, and her husband is in admissions. So, I mean, those are things that I really look through. If you're thinking like single mom journey or single parent journey, there's a lot of really great resources and Facebook communities that are helpful for families or parents. And then I think it's really just tapping into people that can help support you. That has been a great thing for me. I, to be very honest, don't have like any books or articles or anything of that nature that I have really like honed in on, but I can probably do a little bit of research and find some to provide later.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Yeah, well, because I think it's just the idea too of like, being a parent, you have much less time to consume content as you previously did. So it's unfortunate casualty, but yeah, and I think it's like that. Everybody kind of navigates their own way. I think through you know research about becoming a parent beforehand and during it, where it's like, yeah, it is just sometimes the random Google searches, and you might find a sort of certain you know publications that you found yourself to rely on, or like I have a couple like just almost like comedy podcasts that sort of normalize the, trials and tribulations of parenthood. And it's like, that's what I honestly find the most helpful versus like getting like academic research or whatever. But I think that's the idea is that like you'll find the people in your life that maybe do like work in or around, early childhood stuff that can be helpful, or just the folks who are like, just really good friends or family members that are more than willing to like chip in and help out and babysit or whatever else, or any of that kind of stuff. So I think even just the idea of try to chart your own path with like your support network and your resources, because I think with parenting there is this notion or idea that there's just like the one right only way, if you just read this book then you'll be fine or whatever. Like my one piece of advice that I've always told people, as like a lot of people I know have started to become parents, is like trust your instincts. Like you're probably going to be a lot better parent than you think you will. And like, cause yeah, you could read all the books in the world and all that, but like you got that screaming baby in front of you or whatever else, or, it's like, trust your instincts. And there's going to be a lot to learn still, and going to be a lot of growth that happens for you as go through all the stages of parenthood and everything. But that's been very reassuring to me. So I thought I would capture it here and share it with other people. So
I think one thing that I always remind myself, and this sounds really bad, but it's like when I'm going through those tough times, what do I need to do to make sure that I am not the parent that I have to interact with on a daily basis? Or what do I need to do to make sure that my child is not the one causing problems later on? That is always kind of what's going through my head, like as we're having conversations about why it's important to like acknowledge when people say hi to you, right? And thinking through like all the experience that we have in working with students and working with parents, and I find myself pretty frequently going, okay, how do I make sure that I'm not that mom in 15 years, right? So, or that parent in 15 years.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's playing a long game, and I kind of being able to like zoom out a little bit, where it's like, okay, hold on, let me not, be that way. Yeah, just because I think that's it's like always aspiring towards like yeah, kind of resting your head at night, being like, did my best. I did the best that I could. I did my best to try to steer them in the right direction, be the best version of myself, the best parent that I can be, and all that. Versus expecting perfection out of your child or yourself or anything else. But yeah, so it's a great conversation that we've had here. I think just a lot of great advice, and I appreciate you so much for taking the time and sharing all these sort of dispatches from your parenting journey so far. And we'll certainly have ways to connect with you and the resources, that we might have for this episode down in the show notes. But yeah, this is great. It's really great to talk about this with you.
Nice to talk to a fellow parent.